I'm David Taylor, and I'm with Molly Scott Cato, who's the Green Party election candidate for the European election. She's in fact number one on the list. Welcome to Glastonbury, Molly, and welcome to La Terre Cafe. I hope your halloumi and your lunch were good.
It was delicious lunch. I could tell it was all organic. It was very tasty.
Excellent. Well, we'd like to ask you a few questions while you're here in the Mendip area, and particularly ask you what your main issues are in this election.
We've only had two main issues in this election, which were energy and farming. And we're saying about farming that we shouldn't just give subsidies to the biggest landowners. We should use them in a way that supports small family farms and encourages farmers to use the land in a more environmentally sensitive way. And on energy, we've been arguing that we've got tremendous renewable energy resources here in the southwest that aren't being used to their full potential, and so we want to give more political support for that, so we don't need to have dangerous electricity generation by nuclear or fracking.
And can you give us a little more specifics on your energy policies in the Mendip area?
Well, it's a kind of southwest-based thing, so I've been visiting proposed site of an energy lagoon in Ilfracombe. Obviously, there's a lot of potential also with wind energy. I was down in Bournemouth on Saturday at a public inquiry into the potential to have an offshore wind farm there. So it's really about diversity, and here I guess there's going to be wind farm proposals because, that's probably the most useful resource here, although I dare say there's also opportunities for small-scale hydro schemes.
Now, you are a professor of economics, and I believe you'll bring a particular expertise in economics, and hopefully you'll be able to inject some green thinking into the sort of trade policies of Europe. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about that.
I think the main thing to say is that the European Union at the moment is very much focused on extending the single market and extending supply chains so that we have more trade over longer distances, and that's kind of the opposite way from how we see it as Greens. So we'd like to get as much of our stuff, food, clothes and so on, locally as possible, and then only look further afield when we can't provide for our needs from within our own region. And so we need to really look seriously at how trade policy works. And of course, it's being driven by the multinational corporations who benefit from these kind of extended trade. And the smaller businesses, I think, are losing out. So I think a revision to the trade policy could really help small businesses here in the southwest.
The Conservative government have said that if they're re-elected, they're going to have an in-out referendum on the European Union after the next general election. And of course, the very existence of the European Union and our membership of it is an issue in this election campaign. And we've got some parties arguing for full withdrawal, and other parties arguing more or less for continuing with the system as it is at the moment. I wonder what the Green Party's position on membership of the European Union is.
We're strong supporters of our continued membership of the European Union. We think that the European Union protects our standard of living here in lots of ways that actually we take for granted. So making sure that we have clean air and clean water, that we have high standards of animal welfare, that we have high standards of employment rules and so on. So we think that these would be at risk if we were to leave the European Union. But we also have our criticisms, particularly the lack of democracy. We think the Parliament should be stronger compared to the Commission, and we also think that we should end the sort of corporate lobbying and the revolving door where people can work in the Commission and work for a corporation and just go backwards and forwards between those two. So we're for staying in the European Union, but we're also supporting a referendum because as a democratic party we think people should have the right to choose, and we think the referendum campaign will give us the opportunity to make the arguments about what the European Union does for us here in the southwest.
As we're aware, I think corporate lobbying within the European Parliament is massive, and corporate lobbyists, a huge amount of money is spent into that. I don't know, I think I've heard some horror statistics for how much pressure ordinary MEPs are put under by corporate lobbyists. So I wanted to ask you more exactly what you think you could do to limit the influence of corporate lobbyists.
Well, I think I would probably go a lot further than the current position of the Green Group. I think actually we need to just stop a lot of the lobbying. A lot of what's said is about transparency, but I'm not sure that really helps, because, saying I got paid an awful lot of money and then I voted this way, it's not really very helpful, is it? You just want people working for electors and not for companies that give them that money. So, I believe that we should have politics funded through the public purse, and I don't think that rich people or corporations should ever be allowed to give money to politicians above a really quite small limit. And I think in terms of the actual lobbying, I think we just need to again limit access to politicians. Of course, requiring them to report meetings they have with big companies would be a first step. But ultimately, I think, where's the justification for politicians meeting whichever company, Monsanto or whoever, every couple of months? I just think that those sort of private meetings are always suspect and should be put under greater scrutiny. And if they're just negative for the people who vote for those politicians, then they shouldn't be allowed to happen.
Interesting, thank you. Now, as you know, we're in Glastonbury right now. Glastonbury has got quite a reputation as a green town. We've got a good group of green town councillors. We're looking forward to having a deputy mayor, a green deputy mayor of Glastonbury. Now, you are from Stroud, and Stroud also has a reputation as a green town. I'm just sort of wondering if you've got any thoughts on how green towns can sort of show the way to the rest of the region, and how you as an MEP might be able to support that process.
I think we've got a fantastic opportunity here in the Southwest to really share our high quality of life with the rest of Europe, and actually ultimately with the world. I think what people in the Southwest have sussed out is actually you're a lot happier if you live in a strong community with good quality food, where you spend a lot of time with your friends, rather than sort of manically working just to acquire money to buy more material stuff. And I'm really proud of the way the Southwest has done that. Glastonbury is obviously an example of that. Stroud, where I live, is an example. Frome. Right across the region, we've got small towns that are thriving, that have really strong communities. As you say, a lot of green representation. We're living sustainably. We're really setting an example of a better sort of life. And I think that's something we urgently need to share with the European Union as a whole. And that's something I think I should be doing as an MEP.
And in your role as an MEP, have you got any ideas of the kind of committees you'd like to join and the sort of work you'd like to do when hopefully you do get elected?
Well, one of the things I've learned as a local councillor is that to be effective you have to pick your issues, and as somebody who understands finance pretty well, I think that's an important area of crisis where I've got something to offer. So I'm certainly intending to try and get involved in the reform of finance across Europe. And the other issue grows more out of my connection to the land and the importance of agriculture in the region here, and so I'll be focusing on food and farming as my other main issue.
Which is fantastic. Of course, agriculture is a big industry around here. Just to ask you another question, whatever happens in the European Parliament, we are facing runaway climate change within 5, 10, 15, the predictions in a very short span, very few years. So my question really is about the big ecological picture, the challenges facing our planet. Is there anything that you think you could do as an MEP to help reverse the slide to runaway climate change?
I think there are two levels on which that works. One is being part of the Green Group, which has pushed all the time for stronger climate policy. I mean, we've got Paris next year, of course, and it's important that we have a very strong group pushing for a global agreement, also having renewable energy targets rather than just carbon targets, because again that makes the policy more concrete and puts more pressure on our own government in London, which is backsliding on its climate targets right now. But I think the other answer goes back to what we were saying just now about the lifestyle and the way we live here in the Southwest, because I think to persuade people to reduce their energy and to live sustainable lives, you need to offer them something good. And I think the way people live in Glastonbury, the way people live in Stroud, is the possibility for a better life that uses less energy. And so I think sharing that is perhaps the most important contribution we can make to addressing the issue of climate change.
Well, thank you very much, Molly. And we just hope that if you are elected, we will see you back in Glastonbury more often. Glastonbury, of course, you might not know, it's almost bang in the geographical centre of the southwest region. So I think an extra reason for you to come back and visit her once you are elected, as I'm sure you will be. Thank you very much for coming.
Well, one of the nicest things about the southwest is there are lots of healing centres, and this is obviously one, and there are lots of magical centres, and I shall certainly be needing to visit them as a sort of antidote to Brussels bureaucracy, won't I?
Yeah, we'll give you a nice bit of healing. Thanks, Molly.